You know, back in 1710, a man named Matthew Henry wrote this commentary that, well, it fundamentally captured a massive shift in how the Western world viewed power.
Right, a total paradigm shift.
Exactly. He looked at this 2,000-year-old speech, which was delivered on this quiet dirt hill to a crowd of, largely oppressed, exhausted people living under military occupation. And he realized something kind of terrifying.
That true revolutions don't start the way we think they do.
Yeah, they don't start with swords or grand political overthrows in some crowded city square. They start by telling the weak, the mourning, and the marginalized that they are actually the ones holding the keys to the kingdom.
It's the absolute definition of an upside-down revolution. I
Yeah.
mean, we expect power to be loud, right, forceful, top-down, but the manifesto laid out on that Galilean hillside, it just operates on a completely different frequency.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking you with us to unpack the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 5. But we're doing it through a very specific and frankly fascinating lens.
We really are. We have the ancient King James Version text, and we're pairing it with that classic 1710 Matthew Henry commentary you mentioned.
And then, to anchor this firmly in the 21st century, we're bringing in a modern analytical breakdown from a piece called Blueprint for Revolution. So we're looking at how this modern source takes these ancient ethical paradigms and maps them directly onto our chaotic, fast-paced world.
Right, the world of anxiety, social media algorithms, constant ideological conflict. It's a brilliant juxtaposition, honestly,
Yeah.
because when you strip away the centuries of cultural baggage and just look at the raw mechanics of what Jesus is proposing here, it is a psychological and sociological earthquake.
Oh, totally. And our mission today is to dissect exactly why this text remains one of the most potent documents in human history, regardless of whether you approach it as sacred scripture or just a philosophical treatise. And we're just reporting on what these sources say, to be clear, impartially unpacking the ideas.
Exactly, we're just looking at the mechanics of the text and the commentary.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the premise we are exploring today is that these teachings are not just beautiful poetry meant to be, stitched onto a throw pillow. They form a radical, actionable manifesto.
A literal blueprint. But to really grasp the weight of this, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the original audience.
Right, which we know was incredibly tense. We aren't going to rehash the historical basics of the Roman occupation because we all know the crushing weight those people were living under. But look at the sociological makeup of that crowd.
You've got fishermen, farmers, zealots, tax collectors.
Yeah, and they are expected. They're looking for a military messiah to hand them weapons and a battle plan, basically.
And instead, Jesus assumes the traditional seated posture of a rabbi and delivers this profound redefinition of what a blessed, successful human life actually requires. I mean, he doesn't offer them a new political structure.
Wait, so what does he offer them?
He offers them a new internal operating system.
Which brings us straight into the Beatitudes. He starts dropping these massive paradoxes right out of the gate. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And he continues with the mourners, the meek, the merciful.
It's completely counterintuitive.
It really is. When I read this through the lens of the Blueprint for Revolution analysis, I found myself genuinely struggling. Because, our modern world is entirely conditioned around the pursuit of self-reliance, right?
Oh, absolutely. Hustle culture, personal branding.
Exactly. We curate these invulnerable, highly competent versions of ourselves online. We are told relentlessly to fake it till you make it. So in a culture that operates on the currency of perceived strength, isn't admitting you are poor in spirit just a recipe for getting absolutely crushed by the machine?
It feels like social suicide, doesn't it? But if we dig into Matthew Henry's 1710 perspective, he clarifies the underlying mechanism here. It isn't about performative self-pity or just weakness for the sake of it.
Okay, so how does he define it?
Well, Henry describes these individuals as being humble and lowly in their own eyes, meaning they have an accurate, uninflated view of their own spiritual poverty. Because when you are full of your own ego, when you genuinely believe your curated, self-sufficient avatar is reality, your hands are completely full. You cannot receive grace because you don't even believe you need it.
Wow. You're too busy holding up to mass, basically.
Precisely. Laying down pride empties your hands. That state of internal bankruptcy is the only psychological state capable of receiving the kingdom. It is the end of striving. And he immediately follows this up with, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted."
Which is another massive collision with our modern instincts. I mean, our culture has built multi-billion-dollar industries dedicated solely to helping us avoid mourning.
Oh, for sure. Entertainment, pharmaceuticals, you name it.
Yeah, we numb it with endless scrolling, we medicate it, we distract ourselves. But the blueprint for Revolution Source highlights something really profound about the target of this morning. It's not just personal grief, is it?
No, not at all. It's grieving for the world's injustices. It's feeling a shared heaviness for the voiceless and the oppressed.
That makes so much sense.
If you are mourning the brokenness of the world, it proves your heart is still aligned with compassion. You haven't allowed the constant barrage of tragedy, which, let's face it, is everywhere now, to make you cynical or numb.
Right, you're staying human.
Exactly. And God promises presence in that unavoidable pain. That capacity to feel, to mourn with those who mourn, is the glue of this upside-down community.
And then there's meekness. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. We have totally bastardized the word meek in English today. I mean, today it just means doormat.
Yeah, someone who just gets walked all over.
But the modern commentary reframes meekness as strength under control. It uses the example of modern advocates for peace who face down incredible hostility with, like, this deliberate gentleness.
I like to think of it like a nuclear reactor versus a nuclear bomb.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. The bomb is chaotic, destructive power, but the reactor contains that exact same immense power, except it's harnessed. It's controlled and directed for a purpose.
So it's not a lack of power at all.
Not at all. You might have the intellectual capacity to absolutely destroy someone in a Twitter argument. You might have the power to retaliate and ruin a reputation. Meekness is having that full arsenal at your disposal and actively choosing restraint. It is a terrifyingly powerful form of self-mastery.
That is profound. Which leads to the pure in heart, which the Source interprets as having an undivided devotion, escaping the fragmentation of our highly distracted, materialistic attention economy.
Which is harder now than ever.
So true. And then, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. This one really struck me because I realized I often confuse peacemaking with peacekeeping.
That distinction is so vital. Peacekeeping is just conflict avoidance. It's maintaining a fragile status quo by sweeping the dirt under the rug so nobody has an uncomfortable conversation.
It's the classic holiday dinner table strategy. Just smile and pass the potatoes so we don't start a war with Uncle Bob.
Right, and it solves absolutely nothing. Peacemaking, on the other hand, is pulling up the rug, pointing at the dirt, and doing the agonizing work of cleaning it up to build a genuine bridge.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is. In our current age of extreme ideological division and cancel culture, being a peacemaker requires stepping right into the crossfire. You will be shot at by both sides.
But wait, there's a paradox here. We've just established that a pure heart brings inner peace, and peacemakers are building bridges.
Yeah.
Why then does Jesus immediately promise that these same peaceful people will be violently persecuted?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. What is it about peacemaking that makes the status quo so angry?
Because the status quo profits from division. When you challenge deeply entrenched power structures with radical, indiscriminate love and truth, the system fights back to preserve itself. What's fascinating here is how Jesus takes the world's definition of success, wealth, dominance, comfort, and completely inverts it. He tells this desperate crowd, you thought you needed political dominance to be blessed. I'm telling you that true blessing is the exact opposite.
It's aligning your human heart with God's, regardless of the external circumstances.
Exactly. So the Beatitudes essentially define the internal character of the citizens of this new revolution.
But if they are supposed to have this profound internal peace, how do they interact with a world that is fundamentally broken? Jesus answers this by shifting to their vital function, calling them the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Let's dive into the mechanics of salt.
Okay, so in the ancient world, salt wasn't just a flavor enhancer. It was literally a matter of life and death. It was the primary method of preservation.
Right, no refrigerators back then.
Exactly. Matthew Henry uses an incredibly visceral image here. He notes that mankind, left to its own ignorance and wickedness, is like a vast heap ready to putrefy.
Oh, well, a vast heap ready to putrefy. Henry did not pull his punches in 1710.
He really didn't. So Jesus is telling these ordinary fishermen and farmers that they are the chemical agents holding back the moral decay of the world. Without a preserving agent, human society naturally decays into corruption.
But he includes a severe warning, right? If the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men.
Yeah, a very stark warning.
When I read that, I couldn't help but wonder about the mechanism of losing your saltiness. I mean, salt is a stable compound. Sodium chloride doesn't just stop being salty. So how exactly does someone lose their saltiness today?
It happens through dilution and compromise.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, if you mix a pound of salt with 100 pounds of dirt, the sodium chloride is still in there, but it can no longer function as a preservative. It's useless. Think about how this plays out in a corporate or social setting.
Like turning a blind eye to things.
Exactly. Being salt is inherently uncomfortable. If you've ever gotten salt in a physical wound, you know the intense sting that precedes the cleansing.
It burns like crazy.
Right. Now, imagine you are in a workplace where ethical corners are constantly being cut. If you act as salt, if you maintain your integrity and refuse to participate, your very presence stings the people around you who are benefiting from that corruption.
You become an irritant to them.
Precisely. Losing your saltiness means you decide that the social or financial cost of being an irritant is simply too high. You stay quiet, you blend in with the dirt, you dilute your convictions so you don't rock the boat. And Jesus is bluntly stating that if you do that, you have forfeited your entire purpose in the world.
Man, that is incredibly close to home. And it's the same dynamic with the second metaphor being the light of the world. He says, you don't light a candle and put it under a bushel. You put it on a candlestick so it gives light to the whole house.
It's all about visibility.
Yeah. When you read this part of the source, you have to ask yourself, and I know I was analyzing my own life here, are we hiding our light just because it's socially comfortable? Are you hiding out of a fear of rejection?
Or just the comfort of fitting in?
Exactly. The text says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. It isn't about building a personal brand, It's about illuminating reality so people can find their way to God.
But if we are supposed to be this abrasive, preserving salt and this highly visible, exposing light, doesn't that put us at odds with the established systems?
It definitely seems like it would.
The natural question the crowd would have is, are you telling us to tear up the rule book? Are we abandoning the Torah to become these radical agents of change?
And Jesus anticipates that exact anxiety. He says, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. He assures them he isn't an anarchist.
Right, he's not tearing down the foundation.
But then he drops an absolute bombshell. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven.
We have to understand the cognitive dissonance that statement would cause in that moment. I mean, we know the Pharisees as the historical antagonists of the Gospels now, but to that crowd, the Pharisees were the absolute zenith of moral purity.
They were the ultimate rule followers.
Exactly. They had reverse-engineered the law into hundreds of micro-regulations to ensure they never even came close to breaking a commandment. To exceed their righteousness would sound mathematically impossible to a regular farmer.
I was trying to find a modern equivalent for the Pharisees' brand of righteousness. The blueprint for revolution analysis really sparked an idea for me here.
Oh, what did you come up with?
It's like buying a verified blue check mark on a social media profile. You pay the fee, you follow the transactional steps, and outwardly you get this badge that projects authority, status, and legitimacy to everyone scrolling past.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right, but that badge tells you absolutely nothing about the actual character of the person behind the screen. The Pharisees were obsessed with maintaining the external badge. They washed the outside of the cup while the inside was filled with, extortion and self-indulgence.
That perfectly captures the mechanism of legalism. The Pharisees managed their behavior perfectly, but they completely neglected their internal motives. So when Jesus says our righteousness must exceed theirs, he isn't demanding a longer checklist of rules.
He's initiating a paradigm shift.
Yes, from an external locus of control to an internal one. Matthew Henry points out that the law is still the ultimate rule of duty, but its primary purpose is to act as a mirror. It shows you your absolute inability to meet God's standard on your own.
Because no one's heart is perfectly pure.
Exactly. True faith bridges this divide. The law shows the need for a savior, and grace provides the internal power to live righteously, not out of a fearful obligation to a blue checkmark checklist, but out of love and transformed desires.
So he isn't lowering the bar. He's moving the bar from our hands to our hearts. And to prove exactly what this looks like, he launches into this famous escalation of virtue, the "you have heard that it was said, but I say unto you," formula.
Right. He takes the established law and tracks it all the way back to its psychological root.
Starting with murder. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment.
He equates unresolved anger and contempt with the moral weight of murder. And Matthew Henry's commentary provides a piercing analysis of the specific insults Jesus uses as examples here.
Like the word raka.
Yes. Calling someone raka, which was an ancient term of absolute scorn, Henry says that stems from arrogant pride. And calling someone thou fool stems from deep-seated hatred. Henry refers to these malicious slanders as poison that kills secretly and slowly.
Reading Henry's 1710 perspective on this is wild, because he effectively describes the exact mechanics of 21st century cancel culture.
So what on?
We log on to platforms where divisive rhetoric, name-calling, and total character assassination are literally the currencies of the algorithm. We may not be physically ending lives, but we are murdering human dignity on an industrial scale every single day, all from the comfort of our keyboards.
And notice the radical urgency of Jesus' solution to this. He says, if you bring your gift to the altar, meaning if you are actively participating in the most sacred religious ritual and you suddenly remember your brother has a grievance against you, you stop.
You just leave it right there.
You leave the gift. You go and reconcile first and then come back to God.
He interrupts holy worship for human reconciliation.
Because the two are completely inseparable. You cannot be in communion with God while actively harboring venom towards someone made in his image. And then he applies the same internal escalation to the concept of lust.
Whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. The blueprint for revolution analysis spends a lot of time on this one.
It's incredibly relevant today.
It highlights how the digital age has hyper-weaponized the commodification of the human body. We are bombarded with media designed specifically to bypass our higher reasoning and trigger lust. It trains us to view other human beings as consumable products for our own gratification rather than souls worthy of respect.
And Jesus' language regarding how to deal with this is shockingly severe. If your right eye offends you, pluck it out. If your right hand offends you, cut it off.
Which is pretty intense imagery.
Now, obviously, this is hyperbole, right? A blind man can still lust in his mind, but the metaphor reveals the sheer violence required to sever the root of sin.
You can't just manage it.
Exactly. If there is an environment, a digital subscription, or a habit that is feeding that internal decay, you cannot just manage it. You must ruthlessly amputate it from your life. It is better to endure the temporary pain of losing that comfort than to let the rot destroy your soul.
This extreme demand for internal integrity continues right into his teachings on oaths and divorce, which essentially boil down to the weight of our words. He says, swear not at all, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay.
In the ancient Near East, people routinely swore by heaven, the earth, or Jerusalem to validate their claims. And that was largely because the baseline assumption was that people were lying unless they swore otherwise.
So Jesus is just saying, tell the truth.
He's demanding the creation of a community where simple honesty is so absolute that taking an oath becomes completely redundant. Your word should be an unbreakable bond.
And he applies that same permanence to the marriage covenant. In a culture where men were handing out certificates of divorce for the most trivial reasons, basically treating marriages as disposable at will agreements, Jesus demands a fidelity that honors the original sacred design of two becoming one flesh.
But if we are looking for the absolute climax of this cognitive dissonance in the sermon, it's his teaching on retaliation. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also.
And he follows it with the ultimate command, right? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to break down the actual mechanics of this.
It's so misunderstood.
When we hear turn the other cheek today, the immediate instinct is to view it as a mandate for passive victimhood. Just lie down and let evil steamroll you. But the blueprint for Revolution Source dissects the sociology of nonviolent resistance, and it is anything but passive.
Oh, it's highly active.
So how exactly does turning the cheek cause cognitive dissonance in the oppressor?
It's a psychological masterstroke. The eye for an eye system is a closed loop of mirrored behavior. If I strike you, the script dictates that you strike me back or you cower in submission.
Right, fight or flight.
In either case, I remain in control of the dynamic. But if I strike you and you refuse to strike back, yet you also refuse to cower, You simply turn the other cheek, maintaining your dignity and standing your ground. You completely break the script.
You short-circuit their operating system.
Exactly that. You force the oppressor to confront the raw, unprovoked brutality of their own actions because you haven't given them the excuse of your retaliation to justify their violence.
The source draws a direct line from this hillside to the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King Jr., actually. They weaponized this exact ethic. When protesters met fire hoses and police dogs with resolute, nonviolent dignity, it didn't just expose the moral bankruptcy of segregation to the world.
It acted as a mirror for the oppressors themselves.
Exactly. It disarmed the hostility by absorbing it and created the only possible space where systemic healing could begin.
Which proves that loving your enemy is not a feeling. Jesus isn't demanding that you manifest warm, fuzzy emotions towards someone who is actively destroying your life.
That would be impossible.
In this paradigm, love is a strategic, willful action. It is choosing to seek the highest good of the other person, regardless of their actions toward you. Why? Because that is exactly how God operates.
It's like the rain falling on the just and unjust.
Yes. Jesus notes that God maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. His love is indiscriminate. If you want to be a child of the Father, you must mimic the Father's indiscriminate grace.
So if righteousness has to be this deeply internalized, if it's entirely about the hidden motives of the heart, it logically forces a reevaluation of how we practice our religion in public, which transitions us into Jesus' critique of performative piety.
The theatrical performances.
Yeah. He takes aim at giving to the poor, praying, and fasting. And he uses this highly satirical, almost comedic image of hypocrites blowing trumpets in the synagogues and in the streets before they hand out their charitable donations, just to make sure everyone is looking.
It's ancient virtue signaling.
And the modern parallel is impossible to miss. What the blueprint for revolutionalysis really nails here is how modern philanthropy is deeply infected with this exact virus. We see massive corporations or influencers executing good deeds, but it's always accompanied by a highly produced photo op.
A dedicated hashtag, a press release.
Exactly. They're essentially monetizing their morality for engagement metrics and public applause.
Jesus has a very chilling final phrase for those people. They have their reward. In the Greek, it's an accounting term meaning paid in full.
Ouch. Paid in full.
If you give to the poor solely to hear the applause of the crowd, the applause is your payment. The transaction is complete. God is not factoring that into your spiritual ledger because it was an exercise in ego building, not an act of worship.
But this is where I hit a wall in the text. Earlier, during the salt and light discussion, he specifically commanded us, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works.
Right, the city on a hill.
But now he says, when you give alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, so that your giving is in secret. How do we reconcile this apparent contradiction? Why are we hiding it now?
It all comes down to the mechanism of motive. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the first command, letting your light shine, is fundamentally about the glory of God. You live in such a transparently good way that people look past you and praise the Father.
Okay, I follow that.
The warning about the trumpets is a safeguard against the ego of man. You shouldn't do good work so people look at you and praise you.
So the action can be identical, but the internal trajectory of the glory is what matters.
Precisely. That's why he advises praying in your closet. In secret, it strips away the audience. When no one is watching, you find out very quickly who you are actually trying to impress.
That makes total sense.
And this leads directly into the Lord's Prayer. He replaces the long-winded, performative, pagan rituals of babbling with radical intimacy. He tells these ordinary people to address the sovereign creator as our Father.
We won't rehash the whole prayer, as everyone knows the text, but the psychological impact of that intimacy is staggering. It shifts the entire foundation of the relationship from appeasing an angry deity to trusting a loving provider.
For daily bread, forgiveness, protection.
Exactly. It acknowledges daily dependence, the difficult necessity of grace, and the reality of spiritual warfare. It's a daily realignment. But here is the critical pivot in the sermon. When our hearts drift out of alignment, when we stop trusting the Father in secret, we instinctively try to build our own security.
We replace God with material control.
Right. And Jesus sees this anxiety building, so he immediately addresses the pursuit of wealth. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven.
He establishes an unbreakable psychological rule here. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Your heart is a trailing indicator. It will inevitably follow whatever you assign the most value to.
I was trying to conceptualize what it means to serve two masters, God and money, as Jesus puts it. It's not just a balancing act. It's like trying to run two completely conflicting operating systems on one computer at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Thanks. The kingdom operating system runs on trust, generosity, and surrender. The mammon operating system runs on fear, hoarding, and total self-reliance. If you try to boot them both up simultaneously, it doesn't just make the system slow down. It inherently crashes the entire machine. It will tear your psychology apart.
That is a phenomenal way to understand the physiological toll of this pursuit. The blueprint for revolution analysis brings in modern data here that is sobering. Just look at our skyrocketing anxiety disorders,
Right epidemic.
the economic instability, the epidemic of burnout, the endless hamster wheel of consumerism. We are exhausting our literal lives trying to stockpile earthly treasures that can be wiped out overnight by a stock market crash, inflation, or a natural disaster. We are desperate for control.
And Jesus addresses this specific anxiety with some of the most profound logic in the entire text. He points to the birds of the air. They don't sow, reap, or hoard in barns, yet they are fed.
And the lilies of the field.
Yes, which don't toil or spin, yet are dressed more beautifully than Solomon.
He is arguing from the lesser to the greater. If the Creator meticulously sustains a bird that lives for a few seasons, or a flower that blooms and withers in a week, the sheer logic dictates that he will sustain you, his eternal image bearer.
Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? I love that line. Wordy is fundamentally useless. Medical science actually proves the opposite is true that she ain't is true. Chronic anxiety doesn't add time. The cortisol and stress actively subtract years from your lifespan.
Worry is the illusion of control. It is a failure to trust the operating system of the kingdom. The antidote Jesus offers is radical surrender to the present moment. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you.
You can't borrow tomorrow's trouble without bankrupting today's strength.
Exactly. Live one day at a time, finding peace in that surrender.
So if we can actually manage to uninstall the mammon operating system and trust God with our own security, it inherently frees us from the anxious need to control and judge the lives of the people around us.
Because if I'm not fiercely guarding my own status, I don't need to tear down yours.
Precisely. Which brings us to the famous teaching on judgment. Judge not, that ye be not judged.
Another widely quoted and wildly misappropriated verse.
Oh, absolutely. He uses this incredibly vivid, almost slapstick imagery. He asks, why are you hyperfixated on the tiny speck of sawdust in your brother's eye when you have a literal wooden beam sticking out of your own eye?
It's a hilarious image if you really picture it.
It is. In the context of our modern internet culture, the psychological mechanism here is pure projection. We have a desperate need to distract from our own internal rot, so we jump onto social media to aggressively condemn a stranger for a misstep.
We see that every day.
We act as the ultimate moral arbiters of their lives while actively ignoring the massive, glaring failures in our own.
It is a defense mechanism, but we must be careful here. Many people use judge not as a shield to demand total moral passivity, arguing that no one is ever allowed to evaluate behavior or point out destructive patterns.
Right, like, you can't judge me means you can't criticize me.
Exactly. But look at the sequence Jesus outlines. He says, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye.
Wait, so the ultimate goal actually is to help your brother get the speck out?
Yes. The community is supposed to help heal one another, but you cannot perform delicate eye surgery on your neighbor while you are blinded by the log of your own unconfessed sin. You will only cause trauma.
You have to clean your own house first.
It requires the painful work of self-examination and repentance first. You approach them not as a superior judge, but as a fellow patient who has found the medicine. And Jesus balances this grace with the hard truth of discernment, warning against giving that which is holy unto the dogs, or casting pearls before swine.
Meaning, you have to read the room. You don't continually force sacred truth upon someone who has proven they are only going to mock it and tear you to pieces.
Exactly. Navigating that incredibly fine line between unrighteous judgment, necessary accountability, and wise discernment requires a level of wisdom we do not naturally possess, which is why Jesus immediately pivots back to the necessity of prayer.
Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you.
Right.
When I first read that, my immediate thought was the classic critique. Does this make God a cosmic vending machine? I put in my prayer coin, press the ask button, and out pops the Ferrari.
It's a common trap.
But the more I looked at the progression of verbs ask, seek, knock, the more it felt like a description of a relationship, not a transaction.
It is an escalation of vulnerability and pursuit. Asking is the baseline admission of need. Seeking implies active movement. You are aligning your life to look for God's will, not just sitting passively.
And knocking.
Knocking implies persistence, when the door appears firmly shut, when the answer is delayed, and you have to wrestle with God in the dark. And Jesus grounds the guarantee of this process in the nature of the Father. He says, if your son asks for bread, will you give him a stone?
No, of course not.
Even broken, flawed humans know how to give good gifts to their kids. How much more will the perfect Father give good things to those who ask?
Good things being the operative phrase there. A good father won't hand a toddler a loaded gun just because the toddler throws a tantrum and asks for it. He gives what is actually beneficial, which means sometimes the answer is a definitive no, because he possesses a vantage point we completely lack.
Which brings us to the culmination of the entire sermon. Jesus has systematically dismantled their worldview. He has redefined blessing, escalated the law to the heart, exposed performative religion, and demanded total surrender of their anxieties. Now he forces a definitive choice.
Neutrality is not an option.
He makes it unequivocally clear that when it comes to this manifesto, neutrality is a myth.
He presents the metaphor of the two gates, the wide gate and the narrow gate. The wide gate is the path of least resistance. It is the popular road of moral relativity, of following the cultural flow, the modern equivalent of live your truth and do it as it feels good.
And everyone is on it.
Yeah, and he notes with tragic clarity that many go in there and it leads to destruction. The narrow gate, on the other hand, requires immense intentionality. It means constantly swimming against the current of your own ego and the culture around you. It is difficult, and few find it, but it leads to life.
And he immediately warns them about the primary danger that will try to pull them off that narrow path. Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
That feels incredibly relevant right now.
This is a profoundly critical warning for the digital age, where we are surrounded by endless influencers, thought leaders, and self-proclaimed gurus. A wolf doesn't announce itself as a predator, it mimics the flock.
It blends in.
It uses the right theological vocabulary, it projects charm, and it might even sound doubly spiritual. But their teachings subtly shift the center of gravity away from God's absolute standard and onto the empowerment of the human ego.
So how do you spot the wolf before it eats you? I mean, if they look like sheep, what's the giveaway?
He gives us the litmus test right there. You shall know them by their fruits. You don't just listen to their charisma, you evaluate the long-term output of their lives and their doctrine. A corrupt tree cannot produce good fruit.
So you look at the results.
Exactly. Does following this person's teaching produce humility, self-sacrifice, and internal peace? Or does it ultimately produce division, greed, moral compromise, and a trail of broken relationships? You test the fruit.
And that warning sets the stage for the final, iconic metaphor of the Sermon on the Mount. The two builders. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand.
This raises an incredibly important observation. Look closely at the atmospheric conditions in both scenarios. The rain descends, the floods come, and the winds blow and beat upon the house.
Wait, the storm hits both houses.
The storm hits both houses. The storm is indiscriminate. There is a toxic brand of theology that suggests if you follow Jesus, if you build on the rock, you are granted immunity from suffering. That is categorically false.
You still go through the storm?
The wise man and the foolish man both experience the catastrophic economic collapse. They both endure the terminal cancer diagnosis, the betrayal of a spouse, the agonizing loss of a child. The presence of the storm is not the variable is the foundation.
The house built on the sand collapses, and the text says, great was the fall of it. Because when your life is built on the shifting sands of wealth, public approval, or your own self-righteousness, and those things are stripped away by tragedy, you have nothing left.
It all washes away.
But the house built on the rock of these radical teachings withstands the floodwaters. It doesn't mean the house isn't battered, but the foundation holds.
And with that stark, binary reality echoing in their ears, Jesus finishes speaking.
The text records the immediate aftermath. It says the people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. This wasn't a scribe debating the minutiae of ceremonial washing.
It was a direct confrontation with reality.
It was a demand for radical, comprehensive life change. So what does this all mean for you listening today? It means that this ancient manifesto is still actively diagnosing our deepest modern dysfunctions.
It's as relevant today as it was then.
It is a living challenge to replace our desperate self-reliance with a poverty of spirit, to replace our digital outrage with the agonizing work of peacemaking, to uninstall our anxious obsession with control and trust a Father who clothes the lilies of the field.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own, something we haven't touched on yet. Consider the heavy silence that must have settled over that Galilean hillside when Jesus finally stood up.
Just the sheer weight of it.
The true test of this revolution was never the awe or the emotional high the crowd felt while sitting on the grass listening to brilliant rhetoric. The true test was what they did on Tuesday morning, when they went back to their nets, back to their fields, back to dealing with the arrogant Roman oppressor.
The moment of implementation.
Yes, the sermon is over. The silence is yours.
Yeah.
What foundation are you going to start building on today?
We usually expect revolutions to be deafening, but maybe the ones that actually reshape human history are the quietest. They don't start with a sword in the square. They start with an internal surrender that changes absolutely everything. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you something profound to wrestle with. Take care.